Love was never the grand moments. An emotional story inspired by Ikaw at Ikaw. Every afternoon at exactly 5:17 p.m., the same man sat on the same bench. Not because it was comfortable. It wasn't. One of the wooden slats was cracked, and whenever it rained, the entire thing smelled like wet leaves. Still, he came. Every day. Same bench. Same time. Same cup of coffee. At first, nobody noticed. Cities have a way of making people invisible. You can walk past the same person for years and never really see them. That's probably why he didn't notice her either. Not at first. She was just another stranger. A woman who happened to sit at the opposite end of the bench every afternoon. Never beside him. Always leaving enough space between them for another person to sit. Though nobody ever did. For weeks, they shared the bench without sharing a single word. One reading a book. The other is staring at the small pond across the park. Occasionally their eyes met. One would nod. The other would nod back. That was the extent of their relationship. Until the rain came. It started suddenly. The kind of rain that appears without warning. One moment the sky was clear. Next, people were running in every direction. The man immediately stood up. The woman did too. Both reached for their umbrellas at exactly the same moment. Then stopping. Because neither of them had one. The realization hung in the air. Followed by silence. Then laughter. Real laughter. The kind strangers usually don't share. Well, the woman said. This is unfortunate. The man nodded. A little. Rain continued falling around them. Neither moved. Neither seemed particularly eager to run. After all, once you're already wet, what's the rush? For the first time, they talked. Not about anything important. Weather. Traffic. The coffee shop across the street. The old dog that wandered through the park every evening. Tiny things. Meaningless things. Yet somehow, when the rain finally stopped, both felt like the walk home was shorter than usual. The next afternoon, they returned. Same bench. Same time. This time the silence felt different. Less awkward. More familiar. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. The conversations grew longer. Still simple. Still ordinary. But longer. The man learned she worked at a bookstore downtown. The woman learned he designed buildings nobody would ever notice. The woman hated spicy food. The man couldn't sleep without background noise. The woman collected postcards. The man had never left the country. Little pieces of a person. The kind that don't matter until suddenly they do. One afternoon, she wasn't there. The bench felt bigger. The park felt quieter. The coffee tasted worse. He hated that he noticed. More importantly, he hated that he cared. He told himself he was being ridiculous. She was just someone he talked to. Someone who happened to sit on the same bench. Nothing more. Yet every few minutes he found himself looking toward the park entrance. Waiting. At 5:43 p.m. she finally appeared. Running. Out of breath. Holding several books against her chest. Sorry. The words came out between breaths. He stared at her. Confused. Sorry for what? She stopped. Thinking. Then smiled. I don't know. The man laughed. And something changed. Not dramatically. Not all at once. Just enough. Just enough to make the next silence feel comfortable. As summer slowly gave way to colder evenings, the bench became part of their routine. Coworkers came and went. Schedules changed. The city continued moving. Yet somehow they always found themselves back here. Same bench. Same time. One evening, the woman arrived carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to him without explanation. He looked at it. Then at her. "You remember?" She shrugged. "Extra sugar. No milk." The man smiled. Because he had told her that once. Months ago. One passing comment. One forgotten conversation. At least he thought it had been forgotten. Apparently not. The realization stayed with him long after he got home. Because being remembered feels different. Especially when you aren't expecting it. That night, for the first time, he wondered something. Not whether she liked him. Not whether they would end up together. Just something simpler. What would happen if one day they stopped? If one day she never came back to the bench? The thought bothered him more than it should have. A few days later, the woman asked a question. A surprisingly obvious question. "What's your name?" The man blinked. Then laughed. "You're kidding." "No. Seriously." She nodded. Seriously. They had spent months talking. Months sharing stories. Months sitting together almost every day. And somehow, neither had ever asked. The man shook his head. Then finally told her. She repeated it once. As if making sure she'd remember. Then offered her own. He repeated hers too. Both were smiling at how ridiculous it was. Strangers. Friends. Whatever they were. Finally becoming real people. The sun was beginning to set. The pond reflected orange light. The park was slowly emptying. For a while, neither spoke. Then the woman looked toward the city skyline and said quietly, "Do you ever think about how weird life is?" The man leaned back. "Depends." Out of all the benches in the city. She smiled. "How did we end up on the same one?" The man followed her gaze. Looking at the pond. The trees. The fading sunlight. Then there was an empty space between them that wasn't quite as wide as it used to be. And for the first time since meeting her, he didn't have an answer. Only a feeling. A small one. A quiet one. The kind that doesn't announce itself. The kind that simply sits beside you. Like someone on a park bench at 5:17 p.m. Waiting for tomorrow. The first time they missed the bench was completely accidental. At least, that's what they told themselves. The woman had stayed late at work. The man got stuck in traffic. By the time either of them reached the park, the sun had already set. The bench sat empty. Waiting. For the first time in months. The next day, they laughed about it. Then immediately started planning how to avoid it happening again. That's when they realized something. Somewhere between coffee conversations and rainy afternoons. The bench had stopped being the reason they met. It was just an excuse. A year later, they moved into the same apartment building. Not together. Not yet. Different floors. Different units. Same building. The man liked to joke that fate was getting lazy. The woman said fate had nothing to do with it. The rent was cheap. The elevator was unreliable. The water pressure was terrible. Yet somehow, it became home. Life settled into a rhythm. Mornings began with rushed goodbyes in the lobby. Evenings ended with conversations in the elevator. Some days they rode together. Some days they didn't. Neither seemed to mind. Because there was always tomorrow. Always another elevator ride. Always another afternoon. At least that's what they thought. The bus stop became the new bench. Every morning, they waited together. Coffee in hand. Half awake. Watching the city slowly wake up around them. The woman usually arrived first. The man was almost always late. Not late enough to miss the bus. Just late enough to annoy her. One day I'm leaving without you. You say that every day. One day I'll mean it. You won't. The woman rolled her eyes. Then handed him a coffee she'd already bought. The same coffee. Extra sugar. No milk. Years passed like that. Not through major events. Through routines. The small things. The invisible things. The things nobody posts online. Nobody tells stories about grocery runs. Nobody tells stories about paying bills. Nobody tells stories about waiting for buses in the rain. Yet somehow, that's where most of life happens. One winter, the man lost his job. Not because he wasn't good at it. The company simply shut down. 300 employees. Gone. Just like that. He tried to stay positive. Tried to act like it wasn't a big deal. The woman saw through it immediately. Because that's what happens when someone knows you long enough. They stop listening to your words. They start listening to your silences. For weeks, he sent applications. For weeks, nothing happened. Rejections. Interviews. More rejections. The apartment felt smaller. The days felt longer. One evening, he sat alone in the dark living room staring at the ceiling. The television wasn't on. The lights weren't on. Nothing. Just silent. A knock came from the door. He ignored it. Another knock. Then another. Eventually he stood up. Opened the door. And found a woman holding 2 bowls of instant noodles. She looked at him. Then at the dark apartment. Then back at him. Nope. What? Nope. Before he could respond, she walked inside. Turned on the lights. Placed the food on the table. And sat down. I wasn't hungry. I wasn't asking. The man laughed despite himself. For the first time in weeks. That night they ate instant noodles while sitting on the floor because neither wanted to clean the table. Years later, neither would remember what they talked about. Only that they talked. Sometimes that's enough. Eventually he found another job. Not his dream job. Not even close. But it paid the bills. Life moved forward. As it always does. There were arguments too. Of course there were. Real relationships aren't built from perfect moments. They're built from imperfect people. One argument lasted 3 days. Neither remembered what started it. Something about dishes. Or laundry. Or maybe it was both. By the end, they were too stubborn to apologize. So they spent 3 days communicating through sticky notes left around the apartment. The woman would leave one on the refrigerator. The man would answer on the microwave. By day 3, they were mostly insulting each other's handwriting. The actual argument had been forgotten. A week later, they were laughing about it. Life continued. Bus stops. Coffee. Groceries. Movie nights. Bad days. Good days. Ordinary days. One evening, after returning home from work, the woman collapsed onto the couch. Exhausted. The man sat beside her. Neither spoke. The television played quietly in the background. Outside, traffic crawled through the streets. The city hummed. The woman rested her head on his shoulder. And after several minutes she said, "Do you think we're boring?" The man smiled. "Probably." She laughed. Then she closed her eyes. We used to have interesting stories. We still do. No, we don't. We absolutely do. Name one. The man thought for a moment. Then looked around the apartment. At the dishes. The laundry basket. The stack of unopened mail. The half-finished puzzle on the coffee table. And finally. At her. I don't know. He smiled. But I think one day we'll miss this. The woman opened one eye. This? Yeah. She looked around. Confused. The dishes. The whole thing. The apartment. The bus rides. The boring conversations. The routine. Everything. The woman stared at him for a second. Then smiled. A quiet smile. The kind that only appears when someone understands exactly what you're trying to say. Outside, the city kept moving. Inside, nothing special happened. No grand declaration. No dramatic moment. Just two people sitting together on an ordinary evening. Completely unaware that years later, these would be the moments they'd remember most. The grocery list was folded so many times that the edges had started to tear. He found it by accident, tucked inside an old wallet he hadn't used in years. At first, he almost threw it away. Just another piece of paper. Just another thing taking up space. Then he recognized the handwriting. And suddenly, he couldn't breathe for a second. The house was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that only exists after someone is gone. He slowly unfolded the paper and sat down at the kitchen table. The same kitchen table they had shared for decades. The same one she always insisted was too small. The same one she refused to replace. Outside, the afternoon sun slipped through the window. Dust floated through the light. And for the first time that day, he smiled. Because at the top of the list, above everything else, she had written, "Don't forget the coffee." Underneath it was a tiny arrow. And beside the arrow, extra sugar. No milk. He laughed. Actually laughed. Alone. In an empty house. Because even after all these years, she still found ways to make fun of him. He looked down at the rest of the list. Bread. Eggs. Rice. Soap. Ordinary things. The kind of things nobody remembers. Yet somehow each item carried a memory. Coffee. The bench. The rainy afternoon when two strangers realized neither of them had brought an umbrella. The awkward conversations. The accidental friendship. The beginning of everything. Bread. The tiny bakery they used to stop at after getting off the bus. The owner always gave them extra bread because he thought they were newlyweds. Even when they were already in their 40s. Eggs. The Sunday mornings. The breakfast she always made while pretending she wasn't the one who enjoyed cooking. Rice. The years when money was tight. When every peso mattered. When they sat at a tiny table calculating bills and convincing each other everything would be okay. So, the apartment. The unreliable elevator. The broken water heater. The place they constantly complained about. The place they later missed. He stared at the list. A simple grocery list. Nothing important. Yet somehow it contained an entire lifetime. People always think love is made of big moments. The wedding. The anniversary. The first date. The first kiss. The dramatic scenes. The memorable stories. But sitting there alone, holding a grocery list older than some adults, he realized those moments weren't the foundation. They were the highlights. The real story happened in between. In the bus rides. In the coffee runs. In the arguments that lasted 3 days. In the notes left on refrigerators. In the conversations no one else heard. In the ordinary days that seemed forgettable while they were happening. His eyes drifted toward the empty chair across from him. For years, that chair had never been empty. Now it always was. Funny how a single missing person can change the shape of an entire room. For a moment, grief appeared. Not suddenly. Not violently. Just quietly. Like an old friend sitting down beside him. But something else arrived with it. Gratitude. Because not everyone gets this. Not everyone gets decades. Not everyone gets a person who stays. Not everyone gets a bench that turns into a bus stop. A bus stop that turns into an apartment. An apartment that turns into a life. He folded the grocery list carefully. Much more carefully than before. Then slipped it back into the wallet. Not because he was afraid of losing it. Because some things deserve protecting. The sun outside was beginning to set. He stood slowly. His knees are complaining louder than they used to. Then walked toward the front door. Every Friday, he visited the park. Every Friday. For years. People often asked why. He never gave them a real answer. Today was Friday. So he grabbed his jacket and left. The city had changed. Buildings were taller. Roads were busier. The bookstore was gone. The bakery was gone. Even the old apartment building had been renovated beyond recognition. Yet somehow, the bench remained. A little older. A little worn. But still there. Waiting. Just like it always had. He sat down. The same spot. The same view. The same pond. The same evening light. For a while, he simply watched the water. Children played nearby. Couples walked past. Life continued. As it should. As it always would. Eventually, he looked toward the empty space beside him. The space she used to occupy. And for the first time in a very long time. It didn't feel empty. Because memories have a strange way of sitting beside us. Not to haunt us. Not to keep us trapped. But to remind us. To remind us of who we loved. Of who loved us. Of the lives we built together. The wind moved gently through the trees. He closed his eyes. And for a brief moment, he could almost hear her voice. Asking why he still came here. Asking why he still sat on this uncomfortable bench. Asking why he still ordered coffee the same way. Extra sugar. No milk. The old man smiled. Then she answered the question she wasn't there to ask. Because this, all of this, was never really about a bench. Or a bus stop. Or a grocery list. It was about two people. Two ordinary people. Who met by accident. Stayed on purpose. And turned 1,000 ordinary days into a beautiful life. And as the sun disappeared beyond the trees, he sat there quietly. Not mourning what was gone. But grateful that it happened at all. Thank you for watching. Follow for more video like this.